Okay, we're going to go ahead and just work on some real simple building of objects now. And so this program is really complicated. Obviously, you can use it to build buildings and lay out really intense three-dimensional spaces. So we're using this like kind of, in the most simplified way you can imagine using it. So I'm just going to do some really fast stuff. What you want to think about doing is just building an interesting three-dimensional model in this program that doesn't come outside of our 4x4 square here, and that isn't too tall. We don't want it to any bigger than 4 inches tall. So it's just kind of a simple little thing to introduce you to 3D printing. So up here we have all of our tools, right? And so the black arrow tool works a lot like the arrow tool in Photoshop or Illustrator, where you use it to select objects. There's an eraser. There's a lot of tutorials online that will take you much deeper than I'm going to take you today. But this will kind of get us started. So what we want to start with, let's just start off by drawing a simple shape like a rectangle. So if you just click on this one, yours might already be a rectangle, but on this tool right here, there's all these options, and just click the rectangle, and we're just going to draw a square here, right? And you can see now we have the square shape that we can kind of select and play around with, and it sits on within our 4x4 inch sort of work area that we had talked about. And so let's go ahead and kind of round off a couple of corners on this. So if you click on this tool here, this is the arc tool, and we'll go with a we'll try a 2-point arc tool. Why not? So you just click on an edge and then click on another edge over here, and just kind of make a selection about that and then let it go. And if you look at it now, if we select our different objects, you can see that these are now two different things. So if I select the outside edge of that arc and just delete it, you can see I've deleted what was inside, and I actually need to go in here and select these lines, and I want to make sure I delete those as well. So you just double click on them and they'll delete. Let's make another one here. So I'll just click on another couple of points in here, and then now you can play around with what that looks like, and then we will delete it. Right? So same thing, double click these black lines, and they'll turn kind of blue, be blue highlighted, and then you can delete them out of there. So now if I went to print this, it's just a flat disk, right? There's no depth to this. So they have this thing they call the extrude tool here. It's kind of like pushing stuff out of if you've ever played with Play-Doh and you squish it out of the extruder, right? So you just click on that, and if we pull on it, you can see it's making it kind of taller now, right? Which is this three-dimensional space that goes up. So that's pretty exciting. And so now if I went to print this, it would just print this big kind of crazy shape. But let's add some other shapes to this just for fun to complicate it. So I'm going to draw a circle like this one in there, right? And then I'm going to grab my extruder tool, and I'm going to pull that circle up like that. And then I can, if I want to, let's see, I want to put another rectangle. Let's put the rectangle over here. And then I want to push down on that. I can definitely play around with all that stuff. I don't think I want to mess with, so I'm going to try to delete that. You can see that it leaves all of the pieces and parts, like all the lines, so you really got to be careful about what you're leaving behind, because the 3D printer will freak out if it thinks it needs to print this tiny little line that's left over. Okay, back on that. And if I grab this tool and I push down on it now, right, I can kind of lower a spot. So to rotate your view, you can just grab this thing and just that tool right there, and that'll show you what the object's looking like, right? So your task is going to be to build an interesting object. Take as much time as you need to kind of cut up a square or a rectangle. You can add a polygon. There's all those different things there, and make something that looks, that looks interesting. That you're, that you feel like is going to be like an interesting, good three-dimensional form. And then we'll, once we get done with that, we can figure out how to print it. So, so there are all these different tools here. If you ever want to know how big something is, you can just grab the this tool and just measure it, and it'll give you a measurement down there. So that's 1 and it's almost 2 inches. That little thing right there. You can just kind of, oops, we're pulling guides now, but yeah, it'll just help you know, like, okay, how wide are my objects? So it kind of gives me, you can check things like how high or how wide they are. Don't mess around too much with the paint. This paint filling tool, that's just for coloring things. This is an interesting tool right here. If you kind of just mouse over it, you'll see this, and that'll let you change the scale of something, so you can kind of like move in the scale a little bit on it, kind of warp things. This tool is kind of a complicated one. I wouldn't mess with that unless you really feel like doing that. You can also grab this tool and kind of whatever you have selected, again, you're kind of warping it. So you can see how they do these things with in architecture to make these crazy buildings that we're all looking at all over the place. So you can freehand draw shapes here if you want to. I find that to be complicated, but that's something you can play with. And there's also obviously an eraser you can use just to erase stuff. What you don't want to do is, if you look at this, you don't want to have things that are like undercut, right? So as you kind of check this over, you want to make sure you're not undercutting anything. So I'll come back in a minute with another tutorial about how to print your 3D objects so that we can export it and get it ready to send it to the 3D printer.